All right, I'll be demonstrating how to use several functions using the Seaborn library. So I have the different libraries that I'll be using. So let me just go ahead and run that. And for this next cell, this is where my data is going to come from. And I'm storing it into a variable called URL. And I will use the does read CSV function to load that in. And I'll put the URL variable and run that. In addition to that, let me just go ahead and do the head method so we can see how the data looks like. All right, so we're dealing with several data columns, several variables, and you can see what the data values look like. So if I want to develop a box plot, I could use the box plot function from the Seaborn library. And so what I'll be doing is I'll be demonstrating how to use the specific function for that box plot and then a more generalized function that can produce the same thing. So for the box plot, I'm going to use the alias since this is coming from Seaborn. And when I type in box plot, since I am using a Google Collaboratory, it gives me the different types of parameters that I could be using for this function. And I will be passing in different types of arguments. So this is going to be one where I'm inputting keyword arguments. So I'll mention the name of the parameter, hit the equal sign, and then I will put the name of the data column in the string. And so I'll be indicating the X, the Y, and the data for now. So the X is going to be for this example, I'll go ahead and just put time, and this is going to be in a string. And then the next argument I'm going to indicate is going to be the total bill. So let me just go ahead and do that. And the data is going to come from the tips data frame that I loaded in. And that's not going to be in quotes. That's a variable, so you don't put that in quotes. I'm going to run that, and this is what the default output looks like. Right, so I could indicate other types of parameters like the call into hue, so we can do some color coding and do some conditions. But I want to just focus on the specific function and the more generalized function for right now. So here is the two box plots showing us the distribution of total bill when you're comparing it from people who have dinner at a restaurant versus people who have lunch at a restaurant. Um, Now, to create this same box plot, you could use the catplot function. And this is a generalized function within Seaborn that allows you to plot other types of plots. And these are usually plots that involve categorical values or a categorical variable and a numerical value together, or maybe just purely a categorical type of variable. So to build another box plot, I'll use the catplot function, and I'm going to use the keyword arguments. So I will say, I'll keep it the same as we have here. So we have time and total bill, and we also have the data of tips. Now, this is not going to work. Actually, yeah, it will work. I need to specify the kind of plot that I want. So if I were to just run this, I'll get an error because it wants to know, well, actually, I don't. It gives me the defaulted plot, which is a strip plot. I'm going to show that next. But if I wanted a box plot, I don't want a strip plot, then I would have to say, comma, kind, and then indicate what I want here. So I believe the keyword is box, and I'm going to put that in string and then run it. And this is what the output looks like. So it's the same type of output. The format in terms of the size of the figure is a little bit different, but these are the same box plots. One's creating what we call a FacetGrid, and then the other one is just using a particular subplot. So the difference between these two is when I mean, they do produce the same thing, but if you're trying to develop a figure that's going to have multiple subplots, then this will be the approach to take rather than the more generalized type of function. Because and if you look at the library, there are other types of parameters that you can fill in. I'm not sure if it will show it here, but there is a parameter that you could use, which is the AX parameter that you would indicate here, assuming that you can have multiple plots, like a 2x2, for example. So if you're having like a 2x2, then you would want to indicate here where exactly this is going to be. So if you're wanting to plot this like on the fourth location of a 2x2, then you would say something like this, and it would plot that box plot there. And that's how you would do it with Seaborn. So with this one, it's probably possible to do, but it's going to require a little bit more code. And again, this would be the approach if you were going to do multiple subplots, but you could use this approach if you aren't. It's just going to be one plot, and it's a box plot. So here's an example of the strip plot that I just accidentally showed you. And let me just copy this over. Or better yet, let me copy this over because I want to just use the specific strip plot function. Everything else is going to be the same in terms of the keyword arguments, but instead of a box plot, it will be a strip plot. Let me go ahead and run this. And that's what the strip plot looks like. So each observation is going to be in its specific time variable. And you can see that like where the observations tend to cluster versus where they tend to spread out in terms of the total bill. So this is similar to a box plot, but it's formatting it in a different way. It's really neat because you get to assess the individual observations. Now, if I were to use the cat plot, and you saw me do this earlier, this is when I used pretty much everything here, right? But I didn't indicate the kind. So let me just go ahead and just copy this entire thing over. How about that? I'll just overwrite what's right here. And instead of kind equals box, I'll just say strip. But you noticed when I did this earlier, I didn't indicate this parameter, and by default, it gave me the strip plot. Right now, I can include this, and it's going to produce the same thing. All right, so it's always a good idea to put the kind here so you know exactly what you're dealing with. Strip plots are not probably as popular as box plots, but they do tell a different story since you can't see the individual observations here. So now let's take a look at the rig plot. So this is when we want to try to produce a regression line. So that means we're dealing with two quantitative variables. And in this case, what we'll do is we'll focus on, we can do total bill and tips. So let me go ahead and say sns.regplot. And for the keyword arguments, I will say total bill and tip. Data is going to come from the tips data frame. Now, I'll just leave these three keyword arguments in. I'll run it. And we have a regression plot where it shows the scatter plots and it shows the regression line along with that shaded area. I think that it's visible on your side. And this is the confidence interval for the regression plot. So there is the generalized way of producing this regression plot, and this would be the LMPlot, the LM plot, which stands for linear model plots. And since this is coming from Seaborn, I will go ahead and copy all of this stuff over here. Put it in here. And let's see, I'll run it so we can see what kind of output by default. I didn't have to indicate a keyword, and it produced the same exact thing. Again, the difference between the two, one is a FacetGrid and the other one is an axes. So if you're trying to produce a figure that's going to include, say, for example, this data visual along with this data visual, the strip plot, along with a box plot, then I would be using those specific ones in my figure object. All right, so let me go ahead and create a series of subplots using Seaborn. So I'm going to create a figure and an axes. I will call this axes here. And then I'm going to use a plt.subplots approach. And I want to create a 2x2. So let's go ahead and leave that there. And I'm going to start indicating in the next lines which type of plots that I want in my axes. And I don't want to have to retype the plots that I want. I already have some of them up top. So let me go ahead and select the ones that I want. So I'll start from the beginning. I will use the box plot, and I'm specifically using the box plot function. I'm going to bring that down and put that in here. And I also want to use the strip plot. Bring that down. And I'll use the regression plot. All right. So even though it's a 2x2, I'll just plot 3 and see how it looks. So now with Seaborn, what I'll do is I'll add an additional argument, and I'm putting this into the AX parameter, and here it is right here. So right now it's set to none, but now since I am creating an axes object and it's 2x2, I will put the name of the object, which is axes, and then I will indicate where this box plot is going to be. So I want this to be on the top left of my 2x2 figure. All right, so I will need to include this parameter in every single plot that I have here. So this one's going to be in the top right. So I'm putting index position 0, 1 here. And this next one will be on, I'll say, second row, first column, like that. All right. And all right. So that should be good. I'll next hit plot show and see what happens. All right. So now I have error. Let's see what it says. There is some illegal arguments, and it's saying that there's something wrong right here. And I misspelled subplot. It should be subplots plural. And let me just correct that. And then run it. And there we have it. Right. So I have 3 different Seaborn plots in a figure object. All right. Now this is a little small. And if I want to adjust the size, there is a parameter that I can enter inside here, which is called figsize, I believe. If not, then I can just look for it, and it should be taking a tuple. So if I say something like 10x8, will that work? Yeah. So it got bigger by me indicating the parameter figsize in here, and it's a lot more readable. Let me see if I can just add one more plot, and this is not going to be from Seaborn. This is going to be from Matplotlib type of plot. So if I were to put something like this, so I'll say axes, and in the last axis, it's going to be 1, 1. I want to plot a histogram of the tips data and focusing on just the tip information. And that should be it. So let me go ahead and run this. And now I have all of my subplots filled out in this figure object, where I'm combining not only Seaborn plots, but I'm doing Matplotlibs as well. I could include additional information on that last plot where I can indicate the x-axis and the y-axis in the title. I can do the same thing for Seaborn, but let me just go ahead and put in I'll do an x-axis. So I'll say set x label to, oops, I did not mean to do that. I'll set it to tips. I'll say tip amount. How about that? Run that, and there we have the x-axis label. All right. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can combine Seaborn and Matplotlib visuals all within one figure using the subplots function.